She laughed so loud that day, her voice echoing through the office, piercing my pride like a knife. I was standing there, holding the termination letter, while she leaned on her desk smirking. But what she didn't know was that her laughter would become the reason I'd build an empire, just to watch her crawl back to me. My name is Ethan Ward, 29 years old, and until last year, I was just another employee in a small but competitive marketing firm called Crescent Dynamics. I wasn't rich, I wasn't connected, but I believed in one thing: hard work pays off. I had joined Crescent as a junior strategist when I was 24. I spent years building campaigns that made millions for clients who didn't even know my name. But I didn't care. I was learning, growing, and I believed that one day I'd climb high enough to be respected. The problem was I was naive. I thought everyone in the office shared that same dream. That's where Clara came in. Clara Morris, the company's golden girl. She was smart, charming, and dangerously competitive. The kind of person who could smile at your face while quietly setting fire to your career behind your back. At first, we were friends. We worked late nights together, shared coffee breaks, and even joked about how underpaid we were. She used to call me Mr. Strategy because I always had a plan for everything. I thought we had a good bond, but power changes people. When she was promoted to team lead, just one level above me, her tone shifted. She became colder, distant. Every time I succeeded, she twisted into something negative. If a client praised me, she'd smile and say, "Oh, Ethan just got lucky." And soon, luck ran out. It started small. A few missing files, wrong data inserted into a client report I never touched. Then came whispers that I was sloppy and distracted. At first, I ignored them. Office gossip, I thought. But then one day, my manager, Steven, called me into his glass-walled office. "Ethan," he said, without looking up from his laptop, "we've had several client complaints about your recent work. This isn't like you. What's going on?" My throat tightened. "Client complaints? Which ones?" He sighed, finally making eye contact. "The Fisher account, the Templeton project, and the Zenith rebrand all reported errors traced back to you." I froze. Those were my biggest projects, but I double-checked everything. Before I could explain, Stephen continued, "I'm sorry, but corporates decided to terminate your contract, effective immediately." The world just stopped. I'd spent 5 years here, building everything from scratch, and just like that, it was over. And then I heard it, a laugh, that sharp, familiar laugh from behind me. "Clara." I turned, and there she was, leaning on the reception counter, pretending to cover her mouth while her eyes glittered with satisfaction. "Guess your strategies didn't work this time, Mr. Strategy," she said, smirking as I walked past her, carrying the box of my things. I didn't say a word, but inside, something shifted. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't humiliation. It was rage, quiet, cold, and alive. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at the city lights through my cracked window. I replayed her laugh over and over in my head, every echo fusing into one silent vow. I'll make her regret it. Not today, not tomorrow, but one day, she'll wish she'd never crossed me. And that's when I made a decision that changed everything. I wasn't going to beg for another job. I wasn't going to prove her wrong by words. I was going to build something bigger than Crescent Dynamics. And one day, Clara would stand in front of me again, not as my rival, but as my employee. I didn't sleep that night. The city was silent, but my mind wasn't. Every thought, every breath, was a spark feeding the fire inside me. I kept hearing her words. "Guess your strategies didn't work this time, Mr. Strategy." She was right. My strategies hadn't worked then, but they would, just not in the way she imagined. The next morning, I opened my old laptop, the one that took 5 minutes just to start. I didn't have a plan, no capital, and no connections, but I had skills. I'd spent 5 years learning how to make brands explode online, how to turn small companies into market names. I knew exactly how Crescent Dynamics ran its clients, and more importantly, where they went wrong. That knowledge was my weapon, so I started small. I called it Ward Strategies, Just me, my laptop, and a free website template that looked like it was designed in 2008. At first, no one took me seriously. I sent hundreds of cold emails to small businesses offering my marketing services. 99 out of 100 ignored me. One replied, a small coffee brand struggling to get noticed in a saturated market. They could only pay me $400. I took it for 2 weeks straight. I worked from sunrise to 3 a.m., pouring everything I knew into their online campaign. Social media blitz, local influencer deals, clever ad targeting. All the tricks I perfected at Crescent but never got credit for. Within a month, their sales tripled. And when the owner, a middle-aged woman named Martha, called me to thank me, her words lit something inside me. Ethan, no one ever believed in us before. You did. We're finally getting noticed. That single call was my validation. I wasn't a failure. I wasn't lucky. I was good. From there, things moved fast. Referrals came in. 2 clients turned into 5, 5 into 15. Within 6 months, Ward Strategies had grown from a single man's desperation into a legitimate agency. I rented a small office, nothing fancy, just a corner space with peeling paint and secondhand furniture. But to me, it was a kingdom. I hired 2 people. Noah, a quiet designer who hated corporate politics, and Leah, a recent grad with sharp instincts for digital marketing. Together, we worked like a small army. Every project was a battle, every client a victory, but success doesn't erase scars. Every time I saw a client list, my eyes would linger on Crescent Dynamics, the company that threw me away like garbage. And Clara, rumor had it, she was now operations manager. The company was expanding, boasting about their exceptional leadership team. My blood boiled every time her name appeared in a LinkedIn post or article. But I kept my silence, because revenge isn't loud, it's patient. Then came the opportunity. About 8 months after my firing, Ward Strategies was finally stable. One day, Leah walked into my office holding a printout. Ethan, you're not going to believe this, she said. Crescent Dynamics just lost their biggest client, Trivesta Electronics. Apparently, the campaign flopped. My eyes widened. Trivesta was the same company Clara and I once pitched together years ago. Any idea why? I asked. Leah shrugged. Word is their creative team's a mess. Clients looking for new agencies. Maybe we should. She didn't finish her sentence, but I already knew this was it. The first real move in my silent war. That night, I sat staring at my reflection in the dark office window, the city lights glimmering behind me like stars waiting to be claimed. I whispered to myself, "You wanted a game, Clara? Let's play." The next day, I sent an email to Trivesta's marketing director, Mr. Dalton. Subject line, "Let me fix what Crescent broke." He replied within 2 hours. 3 days later, I was standing in their glass skyscraper, presenting my pitch with the same confidence I'd once offered Crescent's clients. Only this time, I owned the name on the deck. Dalton leaned back after presentation, impressed. You sound familiar. Weren't you with Crescent Dynamics before?" I smiled slightly. I was, until they decided they didn't need me. Dalton chuckled. Their loss, I suppose. 2 days later, Trivesta signed with Ward Strategies. It was poetic. The same company that had once praised Clara and me together now trusted me alone. The deal was massive, our biggest yet, enough to hire more staff, expand to a bigger office, and start making waves in the same market Crescent dominated. I didn't tell anyone the full story behind my grin that night. But when the champagne popped and my small team cheered, I whispered a promise to myself. This is just the beginning. I'm not here to compete with them. I'm here to bury them. And as fate would have it, the first real confrontation wasn't far away. Because a few weeks later, I got an unexpected email from Clara Morris herself. I still remember the subject line of Clara's email like a splinter under my skin. Subject, "We need to talk, urgent Clara." Her name at the top made my hand steady. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I poured coffee, walked to the window of our new office, the one with raw concrete and a view of the city, and then opened the message as if I were reading an offer from an enemy general. Ethan, it's Clara. I know this is awkward. I heard about Trivesta. Congratulations on the win. I won't beat around the bush. Crescent is hemorrhaging clients and the board is panicking. We need outside counsel. I'm proposing a short-term consultancy. You and your team lead a rescue for one of our stranded accounts. We'll compensate generously. Please respond quickly. This is internal and time-sensitive. Clara, there was the first tremor of hope after her laugh. She was offering me a seat back at the table, but this time on her terms. I could feel the old anger tangling with a new, cleaner hunger, not just to succeed, but to control. I typed a reply that was both courteous and slow, like easing a blade into warm leather. Clara, thanks for reaching out. Tell me when you want to meet. I'll be there. Ethan, I could have declined. I could have ignored the reach out and let Crescent bleed. But revenge, I learned, is surgical. It requires proximity. You don't torch a house from across the street if you want the unsuspecting owner inside when it collapses. A week later, I was sitting across from Clara in a nondescript conference room at Crescent Dynamics. The place smelled like expensive cologne and the faint antiseptic of corporate confidence. She sat with immaculate posture, the same polished smile, professional armor she'd honed for years, but her eyes were tired in a way they never used to be. That, more than anything, gave me quiet satisfaction. You look good, Ethan, she said, the words smooth as silk. You look tired, I answered. She laughed, smaller than I remembered. Okay, Phil, let's get to it. The Zenith account needs a relaunch, and we need someone who can deliver results in 30 days. I pitched your name to the board. They trust the numbers you put in the deck. But this is strictly consultancy, a clean, temporary engagement. You lead, Crescent pays. No strings. She said no strings like a magic spell. Of course there would be strings. There always were. We discussed scope. We discussed budgets. I took meticulous notes, the same way I had when I was their underpaid strategist. But this time, every phrase I wrote was a foot inside their door. At the end of the meeting, she leaned forward, eyes flicking with something I'd never seen before. Fear, maybe, or calculation. Ethan, she said softly, if this goes well, maybe there's room for more. Crescent isn't dead. We just need the right leadership. You have a history here. The plain truth in her voice was intoxicating. She was asking, without asking, to be saved by the man she once mocked. My pulse thrummed with the delicious sound of role reversal. I accepted the consultancy. Publicly, it was professional. Privately, it was a chance to be inside Crescent again, to touch the bones of the company that had tossed me aside. For the first week, I threw myself into work, late nights, back-to-back meetings, restructuring pitches, and my team executed like well-oiled soldiers. But I had another plan running beneath the project, quiet and meticulous. On day 3, I asked for access to Crescent's campaign archives and analytics for Zenith. They provided it with the baffled compliance of people who think they still hold the upper hand. I skimmed numbers, timelines, and creative drafts. Patterns stood out: deliberate misreporting, omitted data, last-minute changes that sabotaged campaigns at key points. The map of sabotage had been drawn in plain sight. It didn't take long to trace the threads back to one inbox. A cluster of change requests routed through Clara's assistant. Timestamps altered to make certain revisions appear to be client-driven. The kind of digital fingerprints a hasty scapegoat might miss. I saved copies, not to expose, yet, but to hold like a loaded card. Meanwhile, I played my part visibly. I delivered a revised Zenith strategy that flattened client objections and reworked messaging for an emotional hit. The client responded to our test campaign within 48 hours, engagement spiking, conversion climbing. We were winning. The board texted Clara like she had rescued them from the cliff. She called me that night. Ethan, she said breathless, the board loved the pitch. If this continues, they're talking about longer consultancy, maybe a partnership with Ward. I let my voice be light. Glad to help. It's business, Clara. Nothing personal. She hesitated. If this goes well, Would you consider a permanent role? You'd be advisor at first, then her voice trailed with a hint of desperation. The laugh that used to slice through the office had been replaced by something softer. Supplication. Inside, I logged the moment like a checkpoint. But I wasn't ready to pull the trigger. Patience, I reminded myself. Surgery requires the right incision. The next move was small and cruel, a nudge to make the pressure build. I started quietly leaking success stories. At a dinner with Trivesta's marketing head, carefully arranged by my account manager, someone from the industry news blog overheard our conversation and wrote a piece. Ward Strategies Rescue Zenith. Former employee returns to fix what was broken. The headline did the work for me. Within 48 hours, clients called Crescent asking whether their leadership knew how fragile the firm had become. Clara's calls grew more frequent. Her tone moved from professional to pleading. She began to pop into our office unannounced, attempting casual conversations that reeked of rehearsed charm. Each visit was a chance for me to watch her practice humility in the mirror of my success. Then the leverage shifted in a way even I hadn't entirely plotted. One afternoon, Leah, sharp-eyed and protective of our reputation, found an email thread buried in Crescent's shared drive. It was a series of messages between Clara and an external consultant, dated months before my firing, where Clara explicitly requested the consultant to quietly remove certain deliverables and make the client believe the changes were theirs. The language was damning. It read like a blueprint for sabotage. Leah brought the printouts to me and waited by my desk, hands folded as if she expected fireworks. "How long have you had this?" I asked. "Found it today. It matches the dates on the Zenith mishap," she said. Her eyes were wide with the simple satisfaction of people who discover how the world actually works, corrupt, fixable. I leaned back. The trap was no longer theoretical. It was lined with documents, timestamps, and 1,000 tiny pieces that formed a clear picture. Clara had orchestrated my downfall. I could have exposed her immediately, dropped the files to the board, watched the ruin cascade. The temptation sang like a siren, but there was more to gain from a slower, more humiliating unraveling. I wanted her to feel every step that led to her knees. So I cataloged the evidence, made copies, and stored them like a gambler holds aces. That week, Clara called again, voice cracking now with earnestness. "Please, Ethan, consider the permanent role. Crescent needs someone like you. We can make it work." I swallowed the information I collected and said only what I needed to say. "I'll consider it," I replied. "But first, let me finish Zenith. After that, we'll talk." On the line, she exhaled like a woman who would want a reprieve. When I hung up, I opened a new document and typed 3 simple words as a reminder. Phase 2, make her beg. And with those words, the trap set in part 3 began to close quietly, inexorably, around a woman who once laughed at me. Because the most satisfying revenge is the one that makes the victor remember every humiliation before the final fall. I began with the smallest instruments of pressure, administrative nudges dressed as helpful suggestions. People underestimate how much power a well-timed process tweak can wield. I recommended a daily KPI digest for Zenith stakeholders and offered to set it up. Crescent welcomed anything that smelled like control. The digest arrived in executives' inboxes each morning. Clean graphs, drop-downs, and a single highlighted anomaly line that I'd been careful to flag. Recent modifications to campaign assets. Source. Internal requests. Executives are creatures of patterns. If something odd shows up on their dashboards consistently, they notice. If it's summarized and delivered concisely every morning, they begin to ask why it happened. My digest was a tiny fever that became common knowledge. Meanwhile, I fed subtle narratives into Crescent circulation. I never lied, only framed facts. When the board praised Zenith's recent uptick, I mentioned, innocuously, that the campaign had been stabilized after a string of odd late-night revisions the previous quarter. Casual coffee room conversations are dangerous. People repeat what's memorable. By the 3rd week, the phrase late-night revisions had a life of its own. Clara tried to compartmentalize. She called me privately, voice clipped with controlled irritation. "Stop politicizing internal processes. Ethan, we're running out of time." I answered with honeyed neutrality. "I'm documenting. If we're to rebuild trust with clients, Transparency has to be the floor, not the ceiling. She bristled but folded. That was the sound of trust eroding, an almost inaudible surrender that only a surgeon notices when operating. Parallel to the administrative chisel, I orchestrated reputational pressure. Ward Strategies began releasing controlled case studies that showcase how small governance failures can tank multi-million-dollar campaigns. I never named Crescent, of course, but the market is narrow. People read patterns between the lines. Agency owners at mixers and panels started asking whether legacy firms were sufficiently disciplined for today's ad ecosystem. Questions layer into doubt. Doubt corrodes confidence. Inside Crescent, suspicion had a passenger. The board's patience was thinning. I'd seen it before. When executives panic, they look for scapegoats before solutions. Clara had always been good at optics. She could smile through a crisis until the cameras focused where she couldn't hide. The first domino fell on an ordinary Tuesday. An email from Zenith Klein arrived with a terse line. We're concerned about last quarter's reporting inconsistencies. Please advise. It landed on Clara's desk like a warning flare. She called an emergency meeting. The board convened. I attended as a consultant and as a witness. My role allowed me to present facts without appearing accusatory. I walked the room through timelines, flagging the same pattern I'd seen months ago. At one point, a board member, someone I'd cultivated with off-the-record lunches, asked directly, who authorized those changes during off hours? There was silence, so loud I could hear the hum of the air conditioner. Clara answered first, with practice calm. We had approvals in the thread. The consultant confirmed client-requested changes. Her voice was precise, the kind used to deflect rather than to explain. But a beat later, someone held up a printout, the thread with altered timestamps Leah had found. The room shifted. Eyes that once admired Clara's poise now slid to her like sunlight on ice. She tried to explain. The words came out like legalese, brittle and thin. There must be a system error. We'll audit the logs. Audit was a statistic printed on every business presentation when someone needed time. Time is the enemy of impulsive boards. But I had already seeded the system with a quiet plan. Before the meeting, I'd arranged a third-party forensic audit under the guise of best practices for client transparency. The auditors were discreet, efficient, and unflinching. They produced a short, surgical report. Internal modification requests have been time-stamped and routed in a way inconsistent with proper approvals. Several entries reference an external consultant's name, one that, when investigated, traced back to conversations and email chains linked to Clara's office. The board read the report with a professional calm that masked the tremor beneath. Fingers tapped, messages went unseen, phones were consulted not for scheduling but for private confirmations. In 5 minutes, the tone of the room had changed. Respectable people began to look like jurors. Clara's veneer cracked in public for the first time in years. She walked out of the boardroom pale, whispering into her phone. I watched her shoulders slump in a way they never had when she'd once leaned on her desk laughing, as I boxed up my things. Watching her try to compose herself, drop into the woman who delighted in my humiliation, was a satisfaction so precise it felt surgical. But I didn't revel. My revenge required more than a single scandal. It required complete erosion of her fortress. Like termites, we'd eat at the foundation until the house settled. The auditor's report was simply a structural assessment. Over the next 2 weeks, Crescent's PR team crafted careful statements. Board members requested follow-up audits and immediate rewrites of approval channels. Clients called for clarification. Clara became the epicenter of every question. She stopped being the confident operations lead and started being the person who had to prove she hadn't manipulated systems to sink campaigns. I kept my hands clean in the headlines. I volunteered to assist with transition documentation, demonstrating competency and helpfulness. That public posture earned me praise from some of the very people who, months ago, had mocked me. It also made my presence indispensable. A convenient adult in a room full of shaken teenagers. Then came the humiliation I had planned. Not exposure, but dependence. Clara's request of me shifted from formal to personal. She emailed, begging for a private meeting. She needed me to vouch for processes she'd overseen. The board demanded a confident witness. We met in the Crescent lobby, away from prying ears. Her makeup was weary. She had fatigue and a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ethan," she said, voice small, "please, I can fix this if they give me one more chance. I need someone with credibility to back me." Her words were confession and supplication folded into one. The person who once mocked me was now asking for validation. It felt like the world had been turned on a hinge, and the light was different. I told her the truth, quiet and clean. "You won't win this if there's a paper trail that contradicts you. You need to come clean with the board and the client. Redemption only comes with honesty." She stared at me, searching for a loophole. "If I do that, will you?" She swallowed. "Will you support me?" I let the silence do the work. Then I said, "I'll support transparency." "Not you." Her face registered the rejection and the sting of it. She left with her hands folded like a supplicant. That was the moment I realized I'd turned the tables. She was no longer my antagonist in a play I'd been cast out of. She was a casualty of her own choices. My next move was mercy and spectacle. In the following board meeting, I presented a redacted dossier that traced the timeline of malicious edits, the email chains, the external consultant's involvement. I framed it as a roadmap to rebuild trust, admit the failure, create a new governance model, and implement third-party oversight. It read like a recovery plan. The board called for Clara to step aside temporarily pending a deeper investigation. She didn't beg publicly. I suspect she tried privately. I know she did. But public defeat is the worst kind. The silence that follows a fall is heavier than any accusation. Her peers nodded in pragmatic agreement. The board voted. Walking out of that meeting, the building felt different. I wasn't a man who had left with a box of his things. I was someone who had used his knowledge to rewrite the power architecture. The thrill was not in seeing Clara's face as she realized she couldn't command anymore. The thrill was in knowing that every decision that followed, every search for redemption, would have to pass through me. I had given the board the tools to fix what Crescent broke, and I had given Clara the most devastating thing, the need to ask me for help and the certainty that I would now determine its terms. My name is Ethan Ward, 29 years old. This is the last act. The investigation dragged like tidewater for 3 weeks, long enough for Crescent's clients to grow nervous and for the market to whisper rumors into boardrooms. During that time, Clara's world shrank. Where once she had corner offices and celebrity lunches, she now had meetings with legal teams and whispers in stairwells. Reporters hadn't yet picked up the story, but inside the building, the air tasted like copper and old paper, an omen. When the board finally called an emergency session, they did it with the kind of formality that hides panic. The room smelled of leftover coffee and the metallic tang of too many decisions. I sat across from Clara, and for the first time since she'd laughed at me with the termination letter in my hand, she looked unwell in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. She looked small. The auditor's final report had been damning. Documented evidence of manipulated approvals, communications pointing to deliberate concealment, and a chain of command that led unmistakably to Clara's office. The board's chairman, an old man who had once been fond of her charm, cleared his throat and read the conclusion out loud. "We recommend immediate suspension pending legal review," he said. "We also propose offering the client a compensatory package and public transparency measures." It read like a sentence. Clara's lips moved, forming a protest that fell into the paper between them. She had practiced rebuttals in the bathroom mirror and polished apologies in the glass elevator. None of it mattered now. The world she had built of smiles and glib reassurances had been measured and found hollow. After the meeting, HR escorted her to a smaller office. There was nobody else there but me, a legal associate, and the HR director. The lights were harsh. The window blinds tugged down as if to keep the rest of the building from looking in. Clara's face had lost its corporate armor. She sat, hands clasped, like someone catching the edges of a fall. "I need you to understand," she began, voice nothing like the laugh that haunted my memory. It was raw, vulnerable. "Please, Ethan, I didn't mean for it to. You didn't mean for a lot of things," I said softly. "But it's not my job to mete out legal consequences. That's for the board and council. I paused. What matters to me is this. Will you take responsibility? She stared at me as if my question were a chisel. If I come clean, will you help me rebuild my career? Can you vouch for me? Please, I can fix this. Give me a chance. There was supplication. She offered me the one thing she never would have considered when she'd mocked me. Surrender on my terms. I could have walked away. I could have let the legal process grind her into acquiescence. I could have been the silent architect of her ruin. But revenge had never been about destruction for its own sake. It had been about restoring balance and learning to wield power without losing the person I wanted to be. So I leaned forward. You want me to vouch for you? I asked. My voice was steady. What exactly are you asking? She fumbled with a tissue, her voice small. A role, not the old one, something lower. I'll take responsibility publicly. I'll apologize to the board and the client. I'll sign whatever oversight the company wants. Please don't let them blacklist me from the industry. I can be useful. The HR director and the legal associate watched like jurors. This was a theater in which reputations were rewritten. I felt the weight of my next words. I set conditions. They were surgical, calibrated to punish, but not to ruin. Public admission. Clara would sign a formal statement admitting errors in judgment and accept responsibility for procedural failures under her watch. The statement would be issued to the client and internally to all Crescent staff. Probationary employment. She would be offered a position at Ward Strategies, but not in leadership. She would join as an associate project coordinator with clear performance milestones, transparent reporting to me, and a structured probation period of 12 months. Full cooperation. She would cooperate with any legal inquiries and assist Crescent in remediation measures. No stone unturned. Humility clause. She would participate in a public town hall at Crescent to answer questions and listen to concerns, with no rehearsed speeches allowed. Only candid responses moderated by HR. Non-disparagement and restitution. She would sign a clause promising not to disparage Crescent or Ward Strategies and accept a partial forfeiture of her most recent bonuses, redirected to client restitution funds. When I finished, Clara's face went through several colors: shock, hope, shame, and then a thin giddiness that was almost relief. She had imagined begging, yes, but she had not imagined the terms would shape her back into something useful rather than brittle. It was punishment with purpose. Do you accept? I asked. She swallowed. The word trembled, but it came, yes. The press release was short and clinical. It said the company had found irregularities, that an internal review was ongoing, and that the implicated executive had accepted responsibility and would step aside pending remediation. In the background, I coordinated with Crescent's client liaison to ensure the apology and restitution were sincere and effective. I wanted the public recovery to look credible, not a PR stunt, but a genuine attempt to repair trust. Clara's town hall was the brutal part. That auditorium had once seen her deliver keynotes with practiced charisma. Now she faced employees who had been burned by projects that failed and clients who had been ghosted. The moderator asked blunt questions. Someone demanded to know why late-night approvals had been allowed. Another asked why junior staff had never felt safe to speak up. Clara answered. She trembled. She apologized. She looked smaller than the woman who'd once leaned over the receptionist with a smirk. And then the final act of the show, her application to Ward Strategies. When she entered my office with a folded resume and a face that refused to meet my eyes, I felt a weird, precise satisfaction. This was the reconciliation I'd imagined, not a pyre, but a recalibration. She stood at my desk as if at an altar. We'll start slow, I said. You'll be under direct supervision. You'll handle logistics. Approvals will be transparent and time-stamped, and all your work will be reviewed. If you meet the milestones, perhaps greater responsibility will follow. I slid a contract across the desk. It was fair, but unambiguous. It offered redemption through labor. She signed. Then she did something I hadn't anticipated. She stood, palms on the desk, and without prompting, she whispered, "I'm sorry, Ethan. I was cruel." Her voice broke. It was the only full apology I ever heard from her. It landed in the room like rain. I nodded, then get to work. The months that followed were strange. Clara showed up every day. She was clumsy at first, apologetic, hyper-attentive to process. She asked more questions than she used to give orders. People watched her, some with pity, some with contempt. Some quietly offered a hand. I kept her on a short leash. Oversight was my assurance to clients and the firm. It was also my way of watching her relearn humility. There were moments when I caught her looking at me, something unreadable in her gaze. Remorse? Gratitude? Pride wounded? Probably all of them. She never asked to be promoted again. She learned to answer to a man she had once dismissed with a laugh. I trained her to be meticulous, to document every approval, to never shortcut ethics for speed. Slowly, she became useful again. Revenge, in the end, was less explosive than I'd imagined. It wasn't the satisfying image of a collapsing empire. It was the recalibration of power, the patient undoing of arrogance, and the construction of accountability in its place. I had wanted her to know what it felt like to beg. She begged. But I wanted something else, too, that she might learn and maybe, in small ways, become better. On the day she first reported to me without flinching, handling a client call with competence and calm, I felt a strange relief, like closing a case file. There was no triumph in her humiliation. There was only an ugly truth sitting less heavy now. Consequences can teach, and punishment can be a beginning if the punished are willing to do the work. As for the laugh that once carved me open, it had lost its power. It lived now only in a memory that had taught me how to build, not just how to burn.